This is The Balanced Dilemma. We tackle the often uniquely, but not always, female dilemma, managing life, work, family, and self. I'm Maura Carlin.
And I'm Christy Derrico. At The Balanced Dilemma, we speak with women and men to hear their balanced stories. Our guests are entrepreneurs, reinventors, creators, executives, parents, and partners, telling us what we really want to know. How the heck did they manage that? And can you have it all and all at the same time?
Our topic today is de-stressing the college process. Is it even possible? As schools reinstitute ACT and SAT requirements for applications, what has changed in the college application process in the post-test optional world?
Kerry Roberts brings her 20 years of marketing and branding to the college admissions process for her clients. As a mother of two teenage sons embarking on their own college admissions journeys, Kerry offers a personal and professional perspective. We first interviewed Kerry in episode 71 back in February of 2024, and now we're back, asking what, if anything, has changed in our new post-COVID, post-Supreme Court decision, post-Varsity Blues scandal world. Here we are.
Right. Welcome, Kerry. It's good to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back.
So let's start with when to start. And whether that's changed. Are you still supposed to start early? And what is early?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And, you know, the child has 4 years of high school, and you want them to feel present in that time. But all of the decisions that you make in high school have implications for the college process. And I think a lot of families don't really know that what they decide for their math class has implications on testing, which has implications on the college process, what they decide to do for their clubs and activities. And so when I think about starting early, it's not about necessarily being all about college and adding that stress for families, but rather being strategic about the decisions that you're making all along the way. And not just academically, but rather, can we tap into a child's interests and authentic passions, right? And lay in front of them opportunities to really dive into those passions. Because at the end of all of their high school, what they really want to be is both qualified academically, but also interesting people who've showed leadership and impact and serving their community. So how do you thoughtfully understand what your child's most excited about and create a strategy so that at the end of it, they really are a compelling applicant who an admissions reader can see, wow, that student's going to bring a lot of value to my campus. So starting early, to me, really helps build out that narrative and that theme where you can think about, we only have 3 summers. How do we maximize them? How does my child engage in their passions outside of the classroom? And then the mechanics of choosing the right classes.
As someone said to me in the recent past, there's, 4 lines on the common application. So be consistent with whatever the extracurriculars are because you only have these lines. I don't know if it's 4 lines. We haven't gotten there yet with this round. But I did think of that, like stay consistent with the extracurriculars. But sometimes that can feel a little like a straitjacket because they're kids, right? They want to try new things.
And while a parent would understand this, I'm not convinced that someone in 12, 13, 14 years old can really have that vision or understanding, which suggests that the parents are to take control of this process early. Is that right? Or am I misreading?
No, I think that there's a part of that you're bang on with. And the last thing we want to do is rob children of their childhood and their opportunity to explore. I think it's about letting them explore and helping them be reflective. What do you love? And sometimes that answer is what they did when they were children. Sometimes it's what they did when all they needed to do was play, right? We know our children so well. You can tell if you have a writer on your hands, a humanities expert who's just so interested in the world around them. I guess I'm less speaking about, jamming your child into a silo early that may or may not be authentic, but rather as a family thinking about what kind of child do I have, what lights them up, and then helping explore that rather than to your point, Christy, ticking boxes, right? That might be disparate, that might not be authentic, that your child might not even love doing just to get into college, if that makes sense in terms of answering your question.
Completely. Now that I'm doing this for the fourth time. But, we started off talking about testing. Where are we at these days? Some of these tests have changed. We had a period of time where we were test optional. What's the landscape like today?
We are definitely emerging out of the post-COVID. Test optional was everywhere.
So it's not sticking. Schools didn't find that you didn't really need the testing to find a good class.
Right.
Or a good candidate.
Many schools are staying. Many schools will stay. And there were a lot of schools that were test optional before the pandemic that were just very comfortable reviewing applications. There's two types of schools coming back online. There are the super elite schools for whom they just needed more data because they've got kids who have perfect grades, wonderful extracurriculars, and for them, some of them are finding, and it's not consistent everywhere in terms of the research, but some of them are finding that the SAT and ACT have been predictive of success. And Dartmouth is an example of a school that came and said, we have actually found that this helps us predict. And I'll stay with Dartmouth just for a minute, even though it's a super elite school, and I don't like to focus on those because it's not the norm for everyone in the country. But what Dartmouth has done is they've evaluated what they want to read scores contextually, which means they can tell you within your child's opportunities and resources zip code high school, right? What might be a 1230 at one school is a 1510 at another school based on resources. And so they can find potential more easily with a score. Is some of the rationale for some of these elite schools bringing them back.
Interesting.
Now, the other school type that's bringing them back is a lot of this big state schools where, they admit by the numbers and they get 100,000 applications and they just need the stats. And so they are finding it helpful to bring and reinstate the testing across the board.
Was any of this, going back to testing, have anything to do with the COVID graduate generation going into college and professors or universities finding that students were not as prepared? Because I have heard that at colleges that they found that those classes, 2021, didn't have quite the same skills for obvious reasons. They didn't get the same education.
Absolutely.
And is that a cause of them saying, you know what, let's see what the testing is?
I haven't heard that pointed to. I've certainly heard that the students that have come out of high school, there was just such a disparate preparedness based on where you were in the country and how your district handled COVID. So absolutely, professors were a little stymied with, trying to balance students who were probably more varied in their academic preparation than they had ever seen in their careers. Absolutely. So I think that's an interesting idea that testing probably is helpful in that regard. And I think what I expected you might have touched on is really grade inflation also just went through the roof with COVID. Everybody was sort of leading with empathy. I think it came from the best intentions. These kids were going through, the whole world was going through something we had, we could never prepare for emotionally. And so I think grade inflation, which was already on the rise for lots of other reasons, I think really had a bit of a jump start. And so now we've got all of these kids with all straight A's, and the extra data point is just that much more
because it's really hard to distinguish. And, one author, Jeffrey Salingo, we've referenced some of his material, and he explained, how they put the applications in different piles and which one do you go back to that might be a maybe, which one's a definite no, and they give them so many points. It's very daunting. going to the ACT, I heard there's a change in this test. Can you tell me about that? You're going to be able to opt out of sections. How does that work?
Yeah, so the SAT changed last year and went completely digital. So there's no longer a paper SAT. This year, and because these companies compete with each other, these are the SAT and the ACT are two businesses. They are competing for market share. So the ACT is changing. They are piloting this spring the option of a paper or a digital test. They will be rolling that out starting, I think, more nationwide. We'll see that in the fall in terms of accessibility all over the country for students to take that test. And you're going to be able to choose the modality that works best for you, which I think is wonderful. You're also going to be able to drop the science section. Now, a lot of students are really excited about that, but it's posing a lot of questions for me as an advisor and for families, because where a student might want to drop the science section, because the testing organizations and the colleges don't talk, we don't know yet how colleges are going to respond to that. And so we have all these kids who are really excited about dropping science, and as advisors, I have to tell them, don't do that yet, because we don't know if colleges will require them, and you don't want to shut doors down. So the only system in the country who have come out with their requirements is the state system of Florida. They will continue to need science. So students in Florida are disappointed. They've got to take that extra section, and the rest of the country is waiting to see what to do. And so the advice right now for any parents listening, go ahead and have your child prepare, keep the science until we understand what's going to happen across the country.
Are there substantive changes coming to the ACT besides the way in which you take it? The way a couple of years ago, I think the SAT changed. And I want you to explain that one also. Because
Sure. Both tests will be shorter than they were 2 years ago. So you'll have a little more time to answer the questions, and it won't be the 3-hour excruciating Saturday morning that it used to be. Both tests, I believe, are coming in at around the 2-hour mark when all is said and done.
Yeah, I was a little surprised when I got a phone call to go pick
Exactly.
my child up an hour earlier. I was like, what? That's not supposed to be over yet. But now you explained it.
Yes. So they're trying to make it less onerous. Hopefully they're still going to be able to do that with all of the integrity and predictability that these scores offer colleges.
with it being digital, will it still be at a specific place? It's not that you're going to be taking it at home?
Right. You'll still be in. So the SAT, actually, let me speak a little bit about the SAT because it went to a dynamic logic responsive test.
I don't know what that means.
So this basically means that the logic in the SAT is going to respond to how well you are doing. That throws a lot of people. I almost wouldn't want students to even understand that going into the test.
You mean the way you answer a question will determine what your next question is?
Especially in the math, let's say, the more advanced your questions, the more you get correct, the more advanced your questions will become.
So you cannot max out if you don't optimize early on in the test. I have heard that.
Right. And so I don't love that because I think it adds another psychological stressor to students. Like, am I getting the hard math or the easy math? The hard math or the easy math? And that's just noise. And so I try not to let students know that is even happening. I encourage parents not to talk about that. You go in, you do the best that you can.
Yeah, and also there's the tortoise and the hare.
The students know.
Some need some time to warm up. So there's no room for that if you have to be someone who's, quick out the gate.
And a calm test taker. So in terms of location, you'll still have to go to a proctored location. The difference is that the SAT is in the cloud. So it is fully digital and, things are stored in the cloud. You come in, you've downloaded what's called the Blue Book through the College Board, and you take the test.
So no one's going to steal the test.
No one should be able to steal the test. The ACT, in hopes to be even more locked down in terms of security, is hardwiring the test taking location, still in a facility, in a gym, or in a test taking center. They are hardwiring. And so this is why I think the rollout might take a little more time than they're predicting, because each facility is going to need to have the capability to hardwire in the test. But they hope that that means it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to keep the test secure.
Okay, now I have to get to something that's always, top of my list of concerns. How many schools should these kids be applying to? What is the recommendation these days?
Gee, I was going to get to what's the perfect number of times to take your testing?
We'll start with Laura's question.
Yeah, let's take that. I think that every student, I encourage every single student to take the test one time, at least. Like there is absolutely no downside. There's no risk, right? If you don't achieve a score that you're proud of, you and your parents see it, nobody else. No, it doesn't go anywhere. So go ahead and take the test. For a student who is gunning for a, let's say, higher score, I encourage them to at least take it 2, perhaps 3 times. Many schools and colleges will what they call super score. So they'll take your best section and allow you to combine that. And so some students strategize. I'm going to really work hard on my reading. And then the next test, I'm going to really work hard on my math. So you can strategize and be kind of efficient with your time. I think once you're in the 4, 5, 6, there's diminishing returns. The child's confidence is struggling. And, at some point, you have to kind of bake it in.
Do a lot of kids really take it that many times?
No,
4, 5,
they
6?
shouldn't. They shouldn't. That's rare.
Yeah.
Is there any change to getting accommodations for those who have disabilities? Or is that...
As far as I know, that has not changed, should not change. I've not heard any inkling that is at risk in any way. Both SAT and ACT have slightly different timelines and documentation that are needed, but as long as you have your testing in place between 2 and 3 years, then you should be able to achieve and lock in your accommodations.
So let's go to the application process and your question.
Well, what I started with was how many schools should kids be expecting to apply to? What is your recommendation these days?
Let me go back to the de-stressing the college process and say that one of the best ways to de-stress this process is to be really clear about what you want out of your college experience. Be very thoughtful about the research and then realistic about your academic zone. And you can apply to a lot fewer schools than I think a lot of families are doing right now.
What are families doing?
So the Common Application, which is, one of the big sort of macro trends that has created the tsunami of applications when we think about what's changed in the last 15,
so we've
20
heard
years.
It's resulted in a multiplication of the number of applications.
Because you just have to push a button.
That's
for
right.
Some of the
so
schools.
these schools have had literally a multiplication.
Exactly.
And that's a lot to deal with.
The Common Application allows you to apply to 20 schools. Now, that is not the recommendation. Not only does it not increase your chances if you're chasing, a selective school, but you can't possibly put forth the research and the thoughtfulness and the craft of writing well-researhed essays.
Because many of them require supplemental essays, so
exactly,
that's where the quality comes into this.
I feel like a very well-balanced list of about 12 schools, plus or minus a couple, is all that any student needs.
That's more than I expected you to say. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I never perfected. Using the I was not the applicant. We, as a family, never perfected that whole list. It ended up being about 5 or 6, but that's a few years old. So I will see what it's going to be like with a child now.
So beyond too many schools, what are other common mistakes in making your college list?
Yes, and these are the things that will help you de-stress the process. One of the biggest mistakes really is not having a balanced list in the first place.
So only shooting for the stars.
Only shooting for the stars. And a lot of families, and I really deeply empathize and I understand the pull of prestige. I do. We all want what's best for our children, and I think we are wired to connect selectivity with future success. Despite, we know in our core that our children carry their own potential, but so chasing,
we're buying a name. We're paying a lot of money, and we're buying a name.
There's a lot of money that goes into the college process for sure. So not having a balanced list and overstretching, that is the first way, to add more stress. The second is, once you have that balanced list, a lot of families show all of their demonstrated interest, all of their love by visiting, signing up, virtual tours, emailing to only those selective schools. And they ignore the schools that are perhaps, more target, more safe. And when this process, I want to be really optimistic, but I will say when this process goes really wrong, it's because the child has spent all of their attention on the top schools. And when that application goes across the desk at a school that they might have considered safe for them, the admissions reader does not believe that child will come. And so they don't extend the invitation because the invitation is their precious resource to give, and they need to understand yield.
And that partially explains why you've got admissions decisions that don't make any sense. Like, why did this kid get into this school but didn't get into that school?
I definitely saw that play out. And there was a small school, Rhodes, and they hand wrote the admission letter. And I'll never just a card. How touching is that? I mean, that definitely is a testament that they're there for your child. Right. They will know their name, and there will be an advocate. And that was a really nice touch.
Absolutely. And how special an honor to feel wanted. Yeah, absolutely.
I know I diverted you. Are there more mistakes in making a list?
I think that, the other thing is, we talk about demonstrated interest and, putting the points on the board, and we often think it's the visits. The other big piece of demonstrated interest is leveraging your early decision very well. If there is a school that you are in love with, that is a good fit, that is a good financial fit, and you are in the academic zone, that is the perfect way, the perfect way to show them that you love them is early decision. That is the Mac Daddy of all demonstrated interest points. And I think, helping families understand that you have one card to play. There is early decision too, but in the ED1 pool, if you have that one card, playing it as strategically as possible can really de-stress the process. There is nothing better than when a child falls in love with a school, they're in the academic zone, they go ahead and play their ED card, and they are out of this process in December. It is,
unless they change their mind. Because I personally thought I wanted to go to one school, and at the end I chose the other one. And I think of that with my children. If they, fall of senior year, you're one person. By the spring, they grow so much, and they grow again when they're in college. But this is just us navigating this process that we're talking about. The other question I have for you is the college essay. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing, I always thought it was important, but I feel like it's even more important now. How do you feel about the college essay? Where does it stand in terms of the landscape of...
And do they really read it?
Exactly.
Most schools do, particularly the ones that are holistic, that claim to be holistic. The giant state schools will tell you they admit mostly by the numbers, mostly by the stats. The Tennessees and the big state schools. Let me separate the personal essay from the college-specific supplemental essays.
When they ask you why you want to come to this school.
Right. So many students and families pour dozens and dozens and dozens of hours into that personal essay, and they feel like that's the thing, that's the key. Not really appreciating that the school is going to actually look at under the microscope. That supplemental essay is not only the school's one chance to ask the student what they care about most, the school cares about most, but it's that one opportunity for the child to directly link their experiences to why they would be a good fit for that school.
Can you give me a sample question? I forget what those questions were.
Oh,
What types of
gosh.
things do they ask? Do you remember?
Sure, they say, they ask, why do you want to go here? Or they ask, what values have you experienced? Do you have that fall, that fit, that meet what our school's values are? Or what will you bring to this
Right.
university?
So that gets into the mission statement and what the school's about and things like that. Got it.
Exactly.
And you should look at the mission statement and their value statements and all of those things.
Right. There's some really tricky questions. There's some really tough questions. What is the biggest problem facing the planet today, and how will education at our school help you tackle that problem?
When I brought
That's-
water to the desert in my junior year, I mean, really, they could get there's such a heavy burden. There's another thing that I've heard about is this video component. Tell me about that. It goes so far as a recruiter said recently that the only students they had been working with for recruiting that didn't get in were the ones that didn't do the video. So I don't know anything about this. Tell me, what is this video and why is it so important?
So it's a relatively new phenomena. The biggest company out there is called Glimpse. So it's Glimpse. It's a glimpse. I actually like what they are doing because their software does not allow the child to edit the video. So I'm a big fan of the schools, and more schools are using Glimpse. It is a 60 or 90 seconds, and it is one cut. You can re-record it, but the best thing I heard the founder of Glimpse said as they were talking to all of these college deans and admissions deans, they get these glossy, scholarly essays, and then on move-in day, they all sound like 17-year-olds. Right? So how do we get a glimpse in to their real life, who they really are?
Is that what they're looking for?
Yes. And so it's...
As opposed to the polished, edited...
Right. This is not a TikTok,
Grammarly.
Right? This is... And so there are a couple of schools that do let you edit, and I almost wish that would go away because this process is stressful enough without a child feeling like they have to make a movie trailer.
Right, and there are some who really don't want to be on camera.
Right. I feel like for the student who they are poised, I think it's a great opportunity. I don't think every student should do it if they don't feel like they will present themselves well. I really don't feel like every student should feel
And what do they
pressured.
say in this glimpse? Is there a prompt, or do they just present something? I did wonder if this also might be with international students confirming who they are, which is something that comes up with the TOEFL test, and so I wondered that, and to make
Or language.
or language,
Right.
which we can think of nefarious reasons for both of those, but it's interesting to think of it as showing them unfiltered and just like normal kids. So.
Yeah, and the kids that I coached through the process last year, we were just brainstorming. What are you most excited about? What would you show a relative who was coming over to visit, right? Whether it was your science project connected to your narrative, or a tour of your dance studio where you are a mentor and cherished and beloved. So you can take your video anywhere. You don't have to be sitting in a chair. You can be out on the streets. And I would encourage students, after listening to the founders and the deans who are reviewing this, not to overthink it, not to overdo it, not to sort of polish the backdrop, but rather 60 seconds of your most authentic, interesting self.
So of the three of us, do we each remember a college essay of ours? I mean, I do.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah. So go ahead. What was yours?
Mine, because I was younger than everyone else, I wrote about being in school with my elders.
I translated, again, I come from Northern Ontario, so I actually translated, I was working in a business class at the time, and I translated investing into the analogy of building a hockey team with aggressive and balanced. So that was, about sort of like
How Malcolm
diverse
Gladwell.
thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very yes.
It really, because that's what he's
yeah.
right, outliers. But mine was, I was a pizza deliverer, and I wrote an essay about it. And now that I've gone through this, I realize that was a really good essay, but I didn't realize it at the time. And my uncle was in education, and he read it. And he was like, "Yes, this is very good." He made a few grammar corrections, but who else has been a pizza deliverer?
But what are the 5 worst topics or 5 bad essay topics?
Unrecommended.
Yeah, I think so. When I think of how do you write a compelling personal statement, the 2x2 grid that I think about is an uncommon topic that is elastic. And so you want to avoid common topics that are not elastic. When I say elastic, I mean, can you stretch it as a theme, right? So pizza delivery, can you stretch that into lots of places? Can you connect pizza delivery to grit, to commitment, right? To dealing with difficult people, to maybe your family and your heritage? How can you connect? How can you take the theme and stretch it? And then how common or uncommon
I'm
it
not
is?
sure I included in there that the boys that I worked with put a fake license plate that I'm not going to say on air what it said, and I drove around for an entire shift with this other license plate on.
Great essay
But
fodder.
that would have been a good
That would
one.
have been,
Essay
I cannot
fodder.
put that, but I do know one ill-advised topic, which has been told to my son not to do sports topics.
Mm-hmm.
And all boys that did play sports would love to say what their favorite, hockey game, football game, and they're not supposed to do that, which is so
But I think,
unfortunate.
and my middle son did write about sports, but not in that way.
Right.
What he talked about was how was it? Well, I guess you'd call it almost a transition from being the player to being a coach and a teacher, and that I think is what you mean by the stretch.
Yes, that's the
He
stretch.
didn't talk about losing the big game or what
Yes.
it is like to have the team around him. This was about growth.
Right. And so when the student is pretty fixated on a common topic, which can happen, they're 17, they have very similar lived experiences. They're the theater kid or they're the sports kid or, and so they feel like that's what they need to write about. Then I first just coach them that you can do it, but you've raised the bar a little bit to be unique. So let's brainstorm, how do we take the sport and really take it to an uncommon place to make it stretchy? And so, sports, the big performance, the challenge that isn't really a challenge, the service trip where you,
Right.
the
parent-funded service trip.
The parent-funded service
But
trip.
giving a good tip, which is something you and I have discussed off air, there's notes on your phone, which we all use them for different things, whether it's to do or whatever. Start popping things in there, that happen, that a kid might say, oh, this was interesting. Maybe I, help someone change their tire. And I don't know, I'm just pulling out of the air, but put the notes now so you can go back to it later because you forget the
Right.
kernels that could be interesting, and then try to stretch them and give them the elasticity that you need for a good
Exactly.
essay.
But none of this isn't really a change. This is part of how the process has always been, or has it evolved?
I don't think it has evolved much. I think that 20 years ago, there was a wonderful innocence to, right? You could just write about something. You could sit down and you could write about it. And I would believe that if we pulled 20-year ago essays, we would get so many more magical pizza delivery essays. And now these kids are a little paralyzed. My own son said that he heard kids refer to the essay as Trauma-lympics.
Oh, gosh.
And that just made me incredibly
Right.
sad.
Right.
These kids don't need to stack their adversity up as the thing that defines them. That's not what the admissions reader is looking for. Many of the kids that we know and that your listenership knows may not have that big challenge that they've overcome.
No.
Right?
They've just been
And
normal
so
kids.
the other thing to avoid, I think, is really highlighting an obstacle that inadvertently
Right.
just doesn't acknowledge their place in the world and how fortunate they are.
Even though that is a prompt.
And
Yes.
another friend, an acquaintance who is a college advisor, had said to me a few years ago that less than 25% of her clientele had ever had a job. And another thing, I'm sure sitting in this room, we each had some type of job, whether it was babysitting or helping the neighbor. I used to help the neighbor clean her cabinets once a year. Something small. Those are little jobs that help you become adulting. That's really what's important. Many kids don't have jobs. And that's something that's reflected, I think, in the landscape of what we're seeing today, that the kids have limited focus, limited situations that show them tackling things that make them
Right.
the adult they will be. Yes.
I mean, they've been scheduled since birth, right? And so we lay out programs and we send them off to camps and they, do all the things. And then if they're into sports, then there just isn't necessarily always time. And then the academics have ratcheted up such that you can't be a beggar at a grocery store anymore
Right.
if you're trying to earn straight A's all the time. So I feel a little to blame, our generation, in terms of where these kids are at and the burden that they are carrying, for sure. But I think that to take the stress out, if I keep coming back to that, one of my favorite essay examples that I share with students is about the Oxford comma. And I tell
I have
students,
written memos to people about the Oxford comma.
I tell students, look, if a student can write a beautiful essay about the Oxford comma, what it meant to him, what it says about his personality, I need you to just breathe. We are going to find a topic that is you authentically, right? And if someone can make the Oxford comma exciting and a portrait into themselves, you've got dozens of ideas, I promise you, not just the sports injury.
Interesting.
So I'd like to hear, what are the hot schools right now? Tell us.
Yeah, it's really, really been interesting. There is a real move to big sports, the South.
Yep.
Kids are looking in. So Tennessee has exploded. Georgia's exploded.
Clemson.
Clemson. I think that a part of it was the last 3-4 years of kids, what they were robbed of during COVID. They just want to burst out,
Socialize.
They just want to be with people.
Yeah.
And so I think that these schools hold a lot of attraction for where you can find great academics and a really lively sports community, social community, frat, Greek life, all of the things. It's really exciting to kids for sure. And I would say that's probably the biggest trend right now.
And do you think, we've seen on the news a lot of protests on campuses. Have any of those activities tarnished the brands of those universities, or are they still the top universities?
And has it had an effect on where students are applying?
Correct.
Right. Look, I mean, nobody's been hit harder than Columbia right now. Columbia was already struggling because they had just come out from underneath of, they were audited as having manipulated some of their numbers for the rankings. So they were in the shadows. Then this happened. It'll be interesting. I'm very interested to see what happens with Columbia. Now, a storied institution, one of the best in the world at what they do for sure. Does the school ever really
I always went to
fall
their
from
publishing
grace?
conference. I don't know if you did that in high school. I loved it.
Did you find people who you might have otherwise thought would apply to Columbia saying, you know what, I'm going to sit that one out?
Not me personally, but I have heard it. Globally, I'm hearing right now that international applications are falling a little bit. I think people are
Only a
a
little?
little wary. Nobody's willing to say yet, but it's interesting to hear admissions.
Do you mean applicants to U.S. universities? That's what you're talking about.
From overseas.
from overseas are looking to the UK, they're looking to Canada, even Oceania as options, Europe, Spain. So it'll be interesting what happens. So this class, let's talk again about optimism. This class right now, the class of 2025, is a really big class. And the applications soared. Deferrals, rejections, it's a bumpy year, this class. Next year, the enrollment cliff starts, and it doesn't come back, I think, until they're saying 2041.
Wow.
That's a big cliff.
Right. So, does it mean that Harvard is going to go from 3% acceptance rate back to 50? No. But I think we're going to see it. I'll be curious to see what happens in this political environment as schools are being, as funding is being pulled back, whether it's NIH and a research school, whether it's other, threats of funding decreases. It'll be interesting to see what happens in admissions between full pay kids potentially having a bit more of an edge. I think the class sizes might get a little bit bigger. And so I'm going to have to warn parents that you might be in a triple. You're going to be living through some of the impacts of this.
Oh.
For those who are still waiting for this year's results or who have been waitlisted or deferred, tell them what they can or should be doing now if there's a school they really want to go to. Let's
we
give people some agency over this.
We had put on our page the letter that you suggest, the waitlist letter. So yes, that was a great letter that people could use. So tell us, what do you say to these?
Oh, wonderful. So first of all, let's acknowledge today is Ivy Day, which means that the most selective / rejective colleges are going to be releasing all of their regular decision. So it's a big day for families, especially those who have applied to those schools. And I'll start, before I jump into what do you do after the decision, I will start by saying, no one outcome should define anyone's worth. And I know that the rejection is hard, but I really try to coach the kids that I work with that you hold your dreams, your potential. There is no set of buildings on the planet that does that. When you get to school, you will find best friends and professors and roommates and research and internships. Throw yourself in, and it matters a lot less where you go. In fact, it can help you,
100%.
Right? In terms of being less competitive in some of those places. So let's assume that you get a wait list or a rejection. If it's a rejection, you should move on. The appeals process without new information is not really a process. So I would say if you get a rejection, unless your world has dramatically changed and you have a lot of new information, I would move on. But if you are waitlisted, the first thing to know is that you need to actively accept that spot on the wait list. Just because they give you a wait list answer doesn't mean you're on the wait list. So that's one of the things that's
really important because you can see how a 17-year-old is like, okay, they waitlisted me, moving on,
Right. So you don't have a spot on the wait list until you formally accept that spot on the wait list. So that's the first thing to know. And then you just need to follow the instructions really, really clearly. If a school asks you not to do anything, it doesn't look good not to follow the directions.
So if they say don't do anything, don't send them a letter.
If they explicitly say don't do anything, you look entitled to then ask for more attention.
Understood.
Right? So if they offer you an opportunity to give them more information and you have new achievements, something you're proud of, a new story to tell, you visited campus, you should write them a letter reinstating all the reasons that you think you're a great fit. I often coach students maybe between the deferral, and earlier in the process and now, maybe you can find an existing student to have a coffee with and give yourself some subject matter, right? Maybe you don't have anything new because the students are often like, there's nothing, I just applied 3 months ago. I've just been doing classwork and same me. So then we go to what is the school published? And let's see if we can find something interesting that connects to your profile that is new at the school that you can talk about that, So how can you sort of elevate your profile as a fit, whether it's something new with you, new with the school, or go out and create a conversation with an existing student so that you have new information to bring. And then write a letter of continued interest, which is really just stating again why you think you're a really great fit.
And, speaking from experience, children are put on the wait list when they appear to not be interested, which may not be the case. And we did have our school counselor get an interview for a child of mine, and they were interviewed and they were accepted on the spot off the wait list. And it ended up being the best school. And I think that's something I'd like to end on with what we're discussing here. With the kids you've worked with, at the end of the day, many of them are very happy with these new journeys, and all of this angst of getting there and thinking I should be here and I should be there and this friend got into there doesn't really matter, because they get into a place where there's wonderful opportunities, and that's what they need to look at and seize upon.
Absolutely. And we all hear it works out, but it really, really, really does. I think, the biggest testament is even the children who are heading to a school that they may not have really had on their radar. 6-8 months later, they couldn't imagine themselves anywhere else.
And they don't even remember all the other thoughts.
Exactly. I mean, the doors that are about to open for all these kids, it's so exciting. It's such an exciting time as we approach May 1st, they really do. If they plug themselves in, it can be so joyous. Yeah.
Kerry, why don't you tell people where they can find you for this wonderful advice?
Yes.
Oh, right. So I publish weekly, sometimes more than that, Instagram reels on Kerry Roberts College Counseling. You can find me on Instagram. Lots of just free advice that's very timely. It's either timely to the admission cycle or it's timely to new trends. And you can find my connection opportunity on thriveeducationgroup.com. So you can connect with me there and book an intro call. And I'm just happy to chat with any family about the process, even if they're just curious and early in the phase.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Please follow us, listen to us, and rate us on our platforms, Spotify, Apple, and our website, thebalanceddilemma.com, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter and email us your suggestions. There's no cost, but it means a lot to us.